Given the keyboard hobby really started flourishing during a time that everyone was trapped inside their homes, had nothing better to do than complain on the internet and make TikToks, all the drama the hobby has seen isn't really that surprising, especially given that this is a hobby that's built up from the ground by the enthusiasts themselves. Today, rather than looking at historic events in the hobby, Team Redline, Ivan and the like, I want to look at controversy that's a little bit more recent. Sorry.
Controversy.
Drama and such that's happened in the hobby in the more recent years, starting off with a relatively wholesome one for the most part, the Back and Echo unicorn drama. Now at this point, everybody probably knows what the Back and Echo is. An open source 60 and 65% gummy O-ring board that gained hype with a wide number of enthusiasts when it was released as a budget in-stock offering from Canon Keys. When the Back and Echo first released, it was really above the rest of the boards in its price point, being created through cast aluminium as opposed to CNC to cut costs, but still offering new enthusiasts the chance to enjoy the sound and feel of gummy O-ring mounting. Being an open source file and being a single piece with very little going on in terms of complex mounting points, the board has become a prime starting point for commission designs and enthusiasts trying their hand at keyboard design. We'll get onto this in a little bit. Now, the design was created by Keysets back in 2020. The project was started to pay homage to the OTD 356 Mini and the TGR Singer Unicorn, within which Keysets plans to make a 60% keyboard with a gasket mount and CSC aluminium unibody case, as per the Unicorn's mounting style. Keysets reached out to Elaine from Singer for permission to start the project, as well as to provide advice regarding the mounting style of the Unicorn. The initial design he posted on the geekhack thread was very much tofu-like, just a standard wedge, but showed promise for the project in terms of the tolerances for the O-ring to sit nicely, and further revisions posted further down the thread, leading us close to the Back and Echo that we know today. 4 months after the project, the files were taken down from GitHub. It turned out that through conversations with Singer, Keysets, who had not explicitly stated that the licensing for the project was going to allow the design to be used commercially. He'd reached out to Singer regarding the project and had permission to go through with it, as long as the exterior and interior of the board were not a one-to-one copy of the Unicorn, and that the licensing allowed for personal use. Now, to be fair to Keysets, he published Elaine's statements, as well as what he did do and what he believes he should have done as well, which is obviously great to see. He had no bad intentions with the project, but it was a misunderstanding on his part, and not running the design licensing past Elaine prior to the release of the files over on GitHub. This realization only came to light when other boards started hitting the market utilizing the Back and Echo files, namely the Phantom 65 that was posted over on Reddit as an interest check. Obviously, this wasn't the end for the project, and the design went through a few revisions, first without the Unicorn mounting posts, but instead used O-ring strips as well as Ava foam pads to cushion the PCB assembly, and finally to version 3 with mounting posts re-implemented. The story of the Back and Echo is one that if the creator was someone else, the end result might have been a lot worse. And as of 2023, a number of projects have implemented the mounting style, boards like the Moon Tower and the Cake 60, as well as many individuals have used the files to create their own one-off custom designs. Now, with the Unicorn being such a loved custom to this day, it's interesting to know that sadly the first release had its own problems. The manufacturer chosen for the initial run sadly decided to steal Elaine's files, trying to produce unlicensed copies of the board without TGR or Singer's consent. The second round prior to the 2.1 and 2.2 releases in the last few years was really only to fulfill boards for the original group buy entrants who were affected by the problems with the manufacturer. It's interesting to know that problems with manufacturers isn't exclusive to Singer, and Buy and Lenya documented relatively recently their own problems with manufacturers during the group buy release of the Bios R2. This was something I wanted to talk about in my video on Bion, but the document literally came out the day the video exported, so let's talk about it here. I'll make sure to link the whole document in the description below if there's something you want to read further on. The group buy for the Bios R2 first opened in November of 2021, with a year turnaround taking into account 6 months for any potential delays. In April of the next year, when the boards were set to be ready, the manufacturer stated it would be another 4 months for the weights to be ready. By October, the boards had been QC'd and packaged for shipment, but the manufacturer approached Bion team requesting further payments of $15,000 to ship the board, a sum not agreed in the contract at all. After some back and forth with the agent, which can be seen in the document, the price was paid and the boards were shipped. But in January of 2023, when the boards arrived, there were unimaginable defects seen in 60% of the boards. In hope to salvage some of them, they attempted to re-anodize, but some of the keyboards had already been sandblasted so many times that the majority of them developed pitting as soon as it was attempted again. The rest of the document goes through the game plan from Buy and Lenya for sorting remaining refunds, options for the original buyers affected, as well as the plans for the near future of manufacturing boards in Finland, which looks pretty promising. What is good to see, the transparency and game plan for the designer in the long term of the brand, and I hope to see things be far smoother for Buy moving forward. Now, I talked about a number of keyboards and keysets in my last video that were shrouded by controversy, long fulfillment, little communication to entrants throughout the whole process, but those weren't the only ones. Surprise, surprise. An interesting keyset group buy with a pretty historic start but a more recent end is the GMK Hyperfuse group buy from 2015. Hyperfuse is a keyset that has been run a number of times over the years in a number of different profiles. This particular buy from the Control-Alt team took far longer than your average GMK group buy, even of today's standards. Hyperfuse is one of those sets that when I think of OG keycap colorways, this is one that stands out to me. Sports a classic grey and white with accents of purple and cyans make the set pop above the rest. The group buy in question opened on the 28th of January 2015, offered from geekhack user Bunny Lake and the Control-Alt team, a vendor who opened shop in 2014 and run a number of different group buys. After the buy, fulfillment started strong, with the images shared of all the caps and early sets being in the hands of group buy entrants. Around the end of 2015, there were still over 200 orders to be shipped, but not even a year after the group buy, not unusual in the world of today's group buy standards. Fast forward to the start of 2016, although the orders were still being packed and shipped, there was an apparent problem with sets missing keys as a result of damaged keys, or buyers reporting damaged keys once they had the product in hand. This, alongside the team facilitating extra sales over private messages, seemed to lengthen the fulfillment considerably, with constant updates of caps being sent, caps being sorted, with an update on the scale of what was left to ship coming in March of 2018. The remaining sets were missing the F8 key, therefore buyers could opt to receive the set now and get the missing key later when replacements had arrived from GMK. The shipment of these started towards the end of 2018. Although the buy was seemingly near its end, at the start of 2019 people were still without keycaps, 4 years since the group buy had started. Missing the F8 key meant that full sets had not been shipped out, and understandably people were starting to get antsy at the frequency of Bunny's replies starting to decrease. By the end of the year, the post saw one final update from Bunny. Quite a personal one regarding his child's health, apologising and stating the remaining sets that hadn't been shipped would be sorted once he is back fully in the hobby. This would be the last update the thread would see from Bunny. Now, it wasn't all doom and gloom. One kind member of the community offered to provide F8 keys to all those missing keys still for the price of postage. Not only this, but Drop offered to send over sets of their own DCX Hyperfuse to everyone who was still missing a set, bringing some closure to the whole ordeal 8.5 years later. Now, Hyperfuse wasn't the only set affected by all this. Other sets like Toxic still had entrants waiting on sets, and this spans back even further to 2014. It's hard to think whether the actions of those involved were done maliciously, but more so whether things got too much to handle. Life getting in the way, and ultimately ghosting and leaving everyone in the dark was the easiest way to get out of the situation. That's not to say I agree with the actions in any way, shape or form though. As much as we're in a place that group buys aren't the worry that they once were, and the process now is far more streamlined than for group buys like Hyperfuse, long fulfillment, poor communication, ghosting are all things that are still affecting members of the community even up until today. Group buys like the Rookie or R2 are still unfulfilled 3 years since the group buy opened, and with no word from the designer in a year and a half, leaving those who joined understandably extremely angry and out of pocket. When talking of long group buys, Rammerworks is one of the names that comes to mind for many over the past few years. I don't want to go into too much detail here because a whole video is warranted, and it is in the works. But even before the Rammer team disbanded and Kate started Hebe in 2021, the combination of little communication, posts of new products over on Instagram while giving no updates to projects that haven't shipped for 2 years, and most recently closing off the comment section on their Instagram page, Rammerworks is a company that has definitely garnered a sour taste in many mouths of community members in recent years. Rammerworks is definitely a company that I had a lot of respect for when I first joined the hobby, and I really enjoyed their boards. The whole Dieter Rams inspired aesthetic they had and the packaging of their boards. Hell, although the Zenith technically isn't a Rammer board per se, it is a board that I've had for years now and it's still very much in my rotation. So I'd like to think they could eventually get their business practices in check, but understandably the disrespect towards their buyers regarding projects for however long has put a large number of members in the community off buying from them in the future. Now the last thing I'd like to talk about today is something that a lot of people have probably already heard about, and that's the recent drama surrounding vendors, starting off with Mechs & Co. The problems regarding Mechs & Co were first brought to the attention of the wider community in the form of a collaborative post across a number of forums and message boards on the 21st of June of this year. The post brought to light financial troubles faced by Mechs & Co as a result of overextending themselves, fulfilling minimum order quantities of group buys in order to meet demand, in a hope they could turn a profit when the extras came in stock. Bearing in mind that the hobby has slowed down a lot in popularity since lockdown lifted, the inherent demand for these sets has diminished, and so stock is not selling out nearly as quickly as it was a few years ago. The first post ended stating Mechs & Co had agreed to provide regular updates for transparency and provide information on the current pending and unfulfilled group buys. While the update part didn't end up actually happening, the list of group buys and the current status was posted over the forums a week later, highlighting a variety of sets and boards that Mechs & Co. run group buys for, and the current status in regards to payments to the associated manufacturers. This wasn't to say all of the sets that had been paid for would necessarily ship out. The sets that were in transit to the country would have to have import fees paid for them to actually reach their warehouse. During all this, the Mechs & Co. Discord had been completely shut off, silencing those who wanted answers for products that they'd purchased. The past 2 months has been very messy regarding this situation, with communication from Mechs & Co. ceasing entirely, presumably on advice from lawyers. So despite trying to rectify the situation to some extent in communication with other vendors, no result has been met. Canon Keys did however go and pick up the Terra Below sets that had been delivered to the warehouse, leaving some consumers with products now in hand. Although this is in the minority in the grand scheme of how many sets and boards are still left unfulfilled. Most recently, other vendors have seemingly disappeared without any updates on order status, not fulfilling orders from their site, and overall having no intention of placing orders with manufacturers for group buys that they have run. We've sadly lost vendors over the last few years who managed to leave the hobby gracefully and will be missed dearly by the community, providing full transparency to customers and overall providing service until the end. Thankfully, I myself have not been affected by any of the group buys run by Mechs & Co, but I do feel for those who have been affected by this, and the resultant ripple effect this will have on the community as a whole. It's never my intention with these videos to add fuel to the fire or call out different makes and vendors. It is definitely interesting to see where problems in this hobby arise, and problems that repeat themselves time and time again. I could talk about how I hate group buys and I think they're awful for the hobby, but if the group buy model didn't exist, we wouldn't have access to the countless designs from individuals that wouldn't have had the necessary capital to release the products otherwise. I do however think the time that we wait for things in this hobby is appalling, and the lack of communication from certain companies and people while waiting for the products is a little bit disheartening. More so when it can lead to exit strategies like some of the ones I've talked about today. As a consumer, the hobby is in a fantastic place right now. We have access to more products than ever before at prices that are actually realistic to newer enthusiasts entering this hobby, but as a vendor or maker, this current race to the bottom is obviously a little concerning, and we might see further vendors and designers having to leave the hobby as a result. With hype in the hobby really starting to die down a bit, we might see a trend of less group buys coming through the gate and a reduction in the number of keyset group buys overall, moving towards smaller run, in-stock products. The rest of the year and the start of 2024 will be very interesting for keyboards, and it will be really interesting to see how the hobby progresses over the course of next year. Now, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a little bit more about the hobby's lore. If you did, make sure to subscribe and leave a like on the video. Make sure to let me know your thoughts about anything I've talked about in the video in the comments down below. Make sure to follow my Instagram and join the Discord for updates. Thanks for watching, and I will see you nerds in the next one. Peace.